What was that?
Well, I know we're still waiting on your son to create our opening riff, so I thought I'd chip in and help a little bit.
At first, I thought it was like Barry White or something. Sounded more like you killing a chicken.
It was not a chicken. It was definitely something much more musical than a chicken. I mean, that
Okay,
was
we
that
really
was
got to
like that was
we got to
orchestra
come up
to
with
your
something.
ears. Yeah, no, you need to get onto your son about this.
Yeah, I mentioned it to him today, and he's like, I don't know how to do riffs, but he could jam anything. So, yeah, he probably ought not to like pirate something or steal
No,
something.
no. Yeah, no copywritten material allowed.
Maybe
So
I'll put this task on you to come up with like an opening jingle or something. You're more musical than I am. I know that. Which
great, you're gonna
does
get
not say
chopsticks.
anything at all.
Yeah, you're gonna get chopsticks next time.
Okay.
All right, so you ready to get this podcast started before I embarrass myself further with more intro
No,
music?
not yet. Actually, I was going to ask you. You've been traveling the world lately, haven't you?
I mean, I've been traveling a little, but not the world as much as I should. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I like
I
to
don't even.
travel the world. I don't like to. We just went to the Caribbean.
Oh, have a good time.
Um, I played much gambling, which is what I do. I did get off the ship once. That's a drastic
That's.
improvement. That's like 100% more than I got off
I
the
was going
ship
to
the
say
last
that's
time.
one more than usual.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
it was good. It
anyway,
was good.
well, good. I've just been sitting at home in Utah, like struggling over the script to figure out
Oh,
what we're going to talk about today. But
figure out so what are we gonna talk about?
all right.
I mean, are you ready to
I
get started?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we're going to talk about, or what I should say, is we're going to talk about some of this wildlife confusion or some of this wildlife misinformation that we get into every single day.
Mm,
Um,
okay, well that's good because I figured since we kind of teed off last week on our reboot talking about your favorite subject, if people only knew how often I have to hear about that, they would really empathize much more deeply with me.
oh, so we're going to talk about it again.
No, no, we are not going to talk about it again. I'd rather you brought up but you know what? Last week when we were talking, you did bring up something about deer. And you had this we were talking about just regular, how it's a cold weather strategy because of the food. And you mentioned that you have
Yeah, no.
deer knowing yeah, no.
Well, actually, I didn't bring up the deer. You brought up the deer. I just clarified things for you.
Well, that's what we're here for, is to clarify things about wildlife. So I thought it would be fitting, though, to segue into explaining different cold weather adaptations.
Okay. So where do you want to start?
Well, again, Steve, since you mentioned last week that adaptation that deer have, just so everyone knows, I'm referring to white-tailed deer here because I know that you'll have probably like be telling us that mule deer do something different.
How'd you know that?
Because I know you very well. So yes, in white-tailed deer, you told us in the last episode that their feeding behavior actually changes in the winter. So my hope is that you can explain that once again, because once you explain that, then I have a good follow-up question for you.
Sure thing. I think what you're referring to about last episode, it wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago, but last episode, we were talking about black bear hibernation and we kind of went off on a tangent. And you mentioned about deer doing things differently in the wintertime as well. So I went on to explain that. And so if we want to talk a little bit about that, if we're going to go in that direction, the thing that people have to understand, and again, we are wildlife lovers. We totally understand and feel for the folks that really have wildlife first and foremost in their life and want to do good things for them. And I mentioned, or we talked briefly about white-tailed deer and some of the things that they do differently in the wintertime. And one of the big differences is when, as you know, throughout the summer and fall and spring especially, you're eating lots of leafy, green, juicy vegetation, some of that fresh growing stuff.
Mhm.
And you know as well as I, throughout North America, in the wintertime, you don't have that plant life growing, except for a few southern latitudes, Louisiana, Florida, some of that. But even in your neck of the woods stuff in Tennessee, in the deep South, you still have this dormant time in the wintertime. You got leaves on your trees now?
I mean, some, right? Like magnolia trees and such, but
Yeah. But most other deciduous trees,
there aren't,
you
well, deciduous trees. I mean, if it's still green right now, it's not a deciduous tree now. It's
that is true. Yeah, you caught me. So
hold on, I
yes,
gotta
even
let me write that down. Terrible on a tree
we might
question. All right.
re-record this episode so I can completely like not say that because
Yeah, it's good. No, I love this. It's my one thing. Give me my thing.
I'll give you your thing.
All
So
right. So deciduous trees are absolutely barren right now.
yes, and the grasses, all the other vegetation that's normally grown throughout North America is dormant this time of the year. Whether it's late December, January, February, we get bitter cold weather in lots and lots of places, snow in many places, and so the plant life dies down. And deer eat plants. So what do they have to do to survive? They don't hibernate like bears, but if you want to talk about hibernation, we can. Uh, no. So what deer do is it's pretty crazy because inside their gut, things change drastically in the wintertime to handle this lack of green, juicy vegetation. So inside the gut, the kind of the microbiome, the whole biotic community within their gut, like the bacteria and microorganisms that help digest their food, it changes. It changes drastically because for most of the year, it's working on those really succulent but easy to digest materials. But in the wintertime, those aren't around. So what do the deer have? They got like we call it browse, which is twigs and branches and terminal buds. It's not that leafy green moist matter. It's pretty woody vegetation. So it's much harder to digest. So inside that deer's body, that whole micro macrobiotic community of organisms kind of shifts so it can dissolve some of this more woody material. Their rumen or digestive tract kind of changes as well to handle this woody vegetation. And like even their metabolism slows down. It's nothing like what we talked about last episode. But the deer's body undergoes this crazy cool change which allows them to digest foods that they can find in the wintertime. So it's completely different than what they're typically eating. So understand or comprende as far as what's going on in a deer's body?
So, and just for clarity, this does not happen in mule deer, which I might mention to everyone are the predominant deer species in the western states where my buddy D resides.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some pretty gnarly differences between whitetails and muleys. One of my favorite things is the way they jump away. Whitetail deer run, and I could do it on the screen. Mule deer do this prancing. They kind of
Like
bounce away. Do
like
you
a
know what it's
Pepe Le
called?
Pew? A Pepe Le Pew
Yes,
run.
it's that Pepe Le Pew run. Do you know what it's called?
No.
Stotting. Stotting. I taught you something. 1-1. We're even.
Duly noted. It is on, buddy.
Anyway, one of the basic differences, and it's a key difference between whitetail and mule deer. You know, whitetail are found primarily throughout North America. Mule deer are more of a western species. So let me ask you, what is the main difference? If I ask you a simple geography question, what does the West have that the East doesn't?
Well, just thinking of landscape, you Westerners have a very bland color, natural color on display. You're lacking that gorgeous luster of green that we Easterners have.
Yeah, no. You have green. I promise you, you have green monopolized. Every color of green, you've got it. We've got every other color on the rainbow that kind of dots our landscape there. But I will say your fall colors are pretty good too. But that's what that's like a 1 week period.
Yeah, really
But
it is.
I'm not talking about the fantastic colors of the West here. think more about what the West has terrain wise.
Okay, so we do have our mountains in the east, but I will say our mountains are ancient, and yours are fresh and young. So your mountains are a tad bit higher than ours, which brings some winter challenges of its own, I would suspect.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of people in the West talk about how grand their mountains are and how tall they are, but if you look from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, there's not much difference between Western mountains and Eastern mountains. You're looking at 5,000 to 6,000 feet in elevation. And believe it or not, that's kind of what we have here in the West too, even those high peaks in the West. But the thing is, that lower elevation where you're starting at the base of the mountain might be 7,000 feet high to begin with, because we're on this high plateau. And so what that does, it creates mountains that instead of being 5 or 6,000 feet tall in the east are now 10,000, 11,000. Colorado's a exception to the rule. They get a lot of 14,000 foot mountains. So the West has high mountains just like the East does, but they're much higher altitude wise. So when you're going above 10,000 feet, crazy temperature differences. And so what we get in the wintertime is loads and loads of snow. And so the way that mule deer, because we got lots of mule deer in those mountains, the way mule deer adapt, they're not changing their gut lining because they can't find the trees underneath 20 feet of snow. So there's nothing on top of the mountain for them to eat because it's just literally feet and feet and feet of snow. So those mule deer have adapted in the wintertime to head down the mountain into the valleys. And usually what they end up going into are these big sagebrush flats. And they kind of change their diet, very similar. It's not a crazy change in the microorganisms, but they alter their diet to eat more of the sagebrush during the wintertime. So anyway, we're not talking about mule deer. I thought you had a question about whitetail.
I do. But before that, you're always telling me that I need to move out west because it's better and it's grander. And I detest the cold. Like I think it's stupid cold if it's below 60 degrees. You're not selling it. Just for the record, you're talking about these
Okay,
absurdly
I
cold
don't
temperatures and
live.
20 feet of snow?
Would you believe the one peak here? I could almost literally see it outside my window. Not last winter, 2 winters ago, they had 90 feet of snow throughout the winter.
Yeah, yeah, you're
Awesome.
selling it, bud. You're selling it.
Well, I do have a thermostat on my wall here that you can actually turn the heat to what you want. So it's
You just
amazing
can't
what
go
you can do.
outside.
You can. Just take a shovel with you, though. So,
Anyway, so yeah, back on topic. Okay, so all right, so I love wild critters, and I know that you do too, D. Like we are critter people, right? We've studied, we've been trained on some of these kind of more complex, less well-known intricacies of deer behavior and physiology. Some of our listeners out there, though, they may not be as well versed, but they may still and probably do still love wildlife just as much as we do. So what do you say to them when they see some of their favorite wild critters, and they're struggling in the winter time, they're cold, they're looking for something to eat. For example, I know lots of folks that like to put out food in the winter to help out the deer and any other critter that just so happens by.
the good old feeding wildlife conundrum. Deal with it a
Yeah.
ton.
Yeah. So what's your take on what we should be telling people?
Well, I'm not going to tell people to stop trying to help wildlife. Heck, I made a career out of doing that. I am, however, going to tell people that there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. Well, shouldn't really say a right way and a wrong way because that implies kind of like a moral standard here. So, what I should probably say is when it comes to feeding wildlife, there's likely a more beneficial or less detrimental approach to feeding wildlife.
So are you referring to people feeding the wrong kind of food in the wintertime?
Well, yeah, that's one of the things. Because if you were told right now, go outside and feed the deer in your backyard, what would likely be one of the first things you think of feeding it.
I'd run by Tractor Supply and I'd see bag upon bag of deer corn.
Yeah, yeah, that's what you don't want to do. Uh, because of that change within their gut, within their rumen, they don't they don't digest the foods that they typically digest this time. Remember, they shifted to more woody type of browse, and that's what their bodies can take. And so a lot of times people are meaning well, but they're not doing any benefit to the animals because they either can't digest it or it's going to pass through their system and provide no nutrients that the deer or other wildlife need at this time. And so oftentimes we try to help and we think we're helping, but we're not really helping. So, in fact, I grew up in Western New York. You think there's snow in Utah, you should go there. So, Buffalo, New York, deer would yard up during the wintertime, get in these huge areas where there's lots of thermal cover, so like pine areas. And people would see all these deer in there and they're struggling to find food. And oftentimes they'll put out hay or other type of material. And I remember reading excerpts from like places in New York or Michigan where people meant well and they put out like a ton of hay and the deer would eat and eat and eat and they would die of starvation with their bellies bloated full of the wrong material because their body just wasn't digesting it. They're getting no nutrients. They kept eating and eating and eating and they starved to death. So
Crazy.
that's one of the things that we have to be cognizant of when we're trying to be that good Samaritan for wildlife. So besides, here's something to think about. Besides feeding the wrong food, we can actually trigger like a cascade of these unseen consequences.
Now you are talking my language. And what folks need to understand is that when we, as humans, step in to assist or do anything in nature, we're altering the outcome of something else. But especially when we're talking about the natural world, it is so deeply complex and interwoven and complicated, and we don't have a completely neutral impact. So, in other words, saving one thing usually is going to have a negative impact on something else.
Excellent point there. I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with this too.
Yeah, you probably do because I know where your passion sits. So,
My passions like the Buffalo Sabres hockey or Ben and Jerry's pistachio ice cream.
oh, okay. So number one, no, doofus. And
Try
number
it. Try
two,
it. Just
no,
try it.
no,
Yeah.
pistachio ice cream.
Oh, just try it.
No,
Just try it. Have you
I.
ever had barbecue like um, sunflower seeds? You swore those were gross, and then you couldn't stop eating them.
Okay,
Just
so
trust me
you're
on this.
not wrong, but I don't like pistachios, and I have tried them. So if you don't like pistachios, is pistachio ice cream just it's a goner already?
Whatever.
So I see how it is. That's how it is. All right. Anyway, but no, so I am not talking about disgusting ice cream flavors. I'm actually I'm talking about that whole predator-prey relationship thing in nature. And, the two of us were probably what most people would call like predator people. And I don't mean that in predators hockey, even though one of us really is predators hockey. Yeah.
To, to any teachers out there, we are not predators or anything, but I agree with you. I like the cute and cuddly. I imagine most of our listeners like the cute and cuddly, and I'm talking like the baby deer, the baby rabbits, and all that. But truthfully, Steph, the critters that kind of eat the cute and cuddly, I, I swear they can be cute and cuddly too in their own special way. Well, maybe not cuddly, but for example, have you ever seen like those newborn like cougar cubs?
Yes. But focus, Daryl. We're talking about feeding wildlife.
All right. Okay. Artificial feeding, or typically what we call supplemental feeding of wildlife. What's the easiest way to say this? Or the most direct way to say it? It's not good, people.
Don't you mean to say it's not beneficial? Remember, a good human is, construct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Artificial feeding of wildlife. It's quite an interesting topic. You would think, all right, I'm gonna I'm gonna use weird analogies here, but you would think like 1 plus 1 equals 2. In other words, there's a hungry animal. Take a deer, for example, and you take that hungry animal and you feed it, you give it food, and then it makes everything good. So 1 + 1 = 2. In other words, deer plus food equals healthy or happy deer.
Happy dear. But then you have to think about all of those other side variables that are part of that exact same equation. Because, besides the predators, okay, so predators that may have needed that deer to survive. You've often set up like this ripple effect or this cascade of related effects that normally wouldn't take place. And because people aren't thinking about those, and we can't, like I said before, we can't even really comprehend the depth and how far that goes. But these consequences, they're going to go unnoticed.
Yeah, because the folks are just thinking about the reaction to their action. So put food out for deer, deer's happy. But as an example, Steph, there was a study done, and I should have looked up the authors and the date of the study, but I promise you I could find it. There was a study done that looked at the nesting success rate of like ground nesting birds. So we're talking like turkey and quail. And what that study kind of looked at was it looked at the nesting success rate for those ground nesting birds when they build a nest that's in close proximity to a deer feeder. Those nests had a much lower, like a significantly lower nesting success rate than those birds that would nest away from those artificial feeders. Now, why do you think that is?
Well, I imagine when you put food out, like I said, you're not just feeding that deer, you're feeding all sorts of wild critters. And I tell you what, I've seen some pretty fat and sassy raccoons in areas where there's a lot of artificial food sources, trash pandas, right?
Yeah, and I could see you getting all giddy over there. Oh, look at the big fat raccoon. But but besides the fat and sassy raccoons there's probably way more raccoons that should be there because you artificially increase their carrying capacity.
Yes. Okay. So science buzzer going off right now. So what Daryl means by carrying capacity is the number of animals that the landscape can support. So in other words, if raccoons eat X amount of food in nature, if you provide extra food, you're going to increase, unnaturally, I guess you could say, you're going to increase the number of raccoons that the land could typically support on its own.
Yeah, so in essence, what you create is an overabundance of raccoons. Now, if you're a ground nesting bird, any idea what that means?
That means that you are serving up an egg breakfast to all of those extra fat and sassy raccoons out there. So it's no wonder that turkey and quail struggle so much in some of those areas.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of research lately looking at the issues with ground nesting birds. We know quail have been declining for decades. Turkey have been declining within the last decade or two. And so they're really studying those birds. What they're finding out from most of the recent studies that like a crazy high percentage of those nests are getting destroyed by predators. They're even like predators are even grabbing not just the eggs, but sometimes the birds on the nest as well. But now, because you wanted to feed some deer, you're putting out extra food, which creates extra mesopredators. I'm going to use another nerdy term. Extra predators on the landscape that now are impacting those cute and cuddly creatures that you like. So, those are some of the consequences. Like, we don't even think about. Remember, you put out food hoping that deer does well, and it might. You might have benefited that deer, but what have you impacted that's not benefiting from it? And that's an example of this ground nesting stuff.
Yeah. So wait a minute though. Because I do want to actually talk about like predator prey traps. Like that sounds pretty interesting for maybe a future topic. But before we go all gloom and doom on everybody and tell them there's absolutely nothing that they can do to help because they're just jacking up everything that they're not even aware of, how can they help?
Well, it's easy, but it's kind of hard as well.
Because that makes sense, said no one ever.
It's easy in that we know what the animal needs, and which is habitat. You know as well as I. And habitat, that's what provides both natural foods and cover. Now, keep in mind, cover is key. It's one of those things that really helps ground nesting birds, since if there's predators on the ground, like just say instead of that overabundance, if there's just natural predators on the ground, that extra cover or lots of weedy, gross vegetation, that helps them hide from those predators. Not just the ones on the ground like the raccoons or foxes. The big one is aerial predators. They can't see those smaller critters on the ground either. So the hard part here is providing that kind of habitat. It can be really, really difficult in some areas. In fact, in your neck of the woods stuff, you know what some of the hardest habitat to maintain is?
I do. It is that gnarly, thick, what some people call ugly, but I call beautiful undergrowth called early successional habitat because I needed to match your nerdness there.
You
Um,
did well.
thank you. And it's called that because, well, when you have a major event that disturbs or clears the landscape, and it can be natural or unnatural, but we'll just go with unnatural since that's kind of normal in the East. So, you could have a wildfire, but most of the common, you're probably looking at like a tractor and a plow. If you let that newly opened up land just sit there, that first succession of plants, the ones that are usually the fastest growing things like the briars and the brambles and things that we are so very used to in the South, it's habitat that people don't love much, but it makes for a tangled, beautiful mess for animals to love it.
Yeah, and here's the thing to think about. Besides providing like escape cover from predators, there is a plethora. I mean, I'm trying to use as many fancy words as I can, but a
So proud.
plethora of food found within that tangled mess. So, besides like new leaves, new growth there's often seeds and berries and tons of insects, like your favorite ones, like ticks and chiggers.
Okay, so the being completely clear, I am not exactly sure the ecological value of either of those. And I do know some critters that love to eat those ticks, especially.
If you mention possums, I am coming through the screen.
Oh, I knew that would get a rise out of you, actually. No, I'm actually talking about your aforementioned ground nesting birds.
All right, I'll give you that. Yeah, absolutely. Turkeys are one of the best known consumers of ticks, especially. So they'll eat all sorts of insects, and it's really, really critical for those ground nesting birds. The nestlings and fledglings that they have running about, insects is one of the primary diets there, and that is what that early successional gnarly briars and brambles provides for them. So all right, we went pretty detailed on a specific cascade with that example of the ground nesting birds. You feel like mention any of the other repercussions of feeding wildlife?
Oh, so do you want me to delve into the fact that artificial feeding of wildlife often concentrates animals and increasing the disease transmission? It creates that artificial feeding dependency. It damages habitats, habituates animals to humans, poses a safety risk when you do that. I mean, do you, I could keep going.
No. Well, you could mention those things. Delve into them. No. I don't know how long we've been going at this, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head with all those other repercussions that we never even think about, and we've got lots of episodes ahead of us. We can delve into them then. Um, but what I primarily wanted you to do, and you did a good job calling out those specific things, we just wanted to throw it out on the table, folks, that this idea of feeding wildlife is not always harmless. Yes, it can help an individual out. So, like I said, that deer that you feed or that bird that you feed, squirrel, did I send
Drinking. I just almost spat like juice all
I
over the
wanted to see that.
screen.
I wanted to see the screen just like get
Coming
covered
out my
in whatever you
nose.
just took a big gulp of.
It's coming out my nose. Thank you very
No, well,
much.
I just saw a meme earlier today. I meant to send it to you, and I don't know. I apologize if I didn't. But but it was a picture of a bird feeder outside someone's window, and usually people are feeding like the titmice and the little jays, whatever. But this particular picture had a big old red-tailed hawk
Nice.
with feathers coming out of its mouth, and it was like, remember, when you feed the birds, you're feeding more than just those cute tiny ones. So anyway, sorry. My mind just took a right hand turn there while you were drinking.
That is okay.
Anyway, so you have to understand that when you feed wildlife, there's consequences. You may do. I'm going to use that term again. You may do good for that particular animal, but you are more than likely causing other things that may not be beneficial or even detrimental to these non-target animals, the ones that we're not planning on feeding. And so, from a wildlife biologist standpoint, we strongly dissuade the public from feeding wildlife. In fact, did you know? I don't even know if you know this, but you know TWS has a very strong position statement on feeding wildlife.
Well, acronym alert. So before I answer that, can you explain to the people what TWS is, please?
I forget who I'm talking to. I keep thinking I'm just talking to you right now. What TWS is, it stands for the Wildlife Society, and it's the professional organization for wildlife biologists like myself and Stephanie. Um, and so, to think of what a professional organization is, there's the AMA, American Medical Association, that medical doctors belong to. There's what is it? What's the lawyer one? The bar. Um,
Yeah, Bar Association.
yeah, the bar association, and so it's kind of where that group of professionals kind of get together, share ideas. It's the certification. Like, this is what we collectively agree upon. And when it comes to the Wildlife Society, they actually put out a position statement on artificial feeding of wildlife. It's fairly long, but it really dives into why feeding wildlife is bad. And so they strongly discourage the public from doing it. And it's not because we want to ruin all your fun, it's because we care about wildlife. And although you might help an individual animal here, you could have major impact elsewhere where you don't even realize it. So, if the leading experts in the field are saying it's not helpful, that means there's a whole lot of misinformation out there, because there are a ton of people out there feeding wildlife, don't you think?
I do. And I let you go on rants all the time, but I'm going to take a tiny sidebar for one right
Woohoo!
now. I think that the biggest problem here is, besides like the typical old man Johnson and the person who just has the bleeding heart and feels like they must do something. I think the biggest problem here is actually, um, well, commercial vendors,
There's
right?
money
Like, I mean,
to be made.
yeah, there's money, there's a lot of money to be made. There's an upcharge if you can label something as wildlife or deer or whatever. Like, you sell the same stuff and you put a different label on it and you can charge a little more. But yeah, I think that the main problem here is, sure, it is the people who think that they're doing good but don't really understand the depth of the consequences of everything else that can happen because of their wanna do good kind of mentality. But I really think that at the end of the day, it's the marketing companies that that does it
100%.
for.
Earlier in the episode, when I asked you, like, what would you do if you wanted to help the deer, and you would run down to the market there and you'd pick up a bag of deer corn. People are selling that deer corn, making a lot of money. Do you think on that bag of deer corn they're going to mention all the negative consequences?
No, and if they do, it's gonna be in tiny words and it's gonna be in a lot of legal jargon. But I mean, they do this across the board. You look at these, you see mineral blocks, you see all of this stuff, that's just not okay. Another sidebar, like birdseed. You Most of the stuff that you get in those mega bags of birdseed that are inexpensive are filler that birds don't even want. It ends up all over the ground, and other things will chomp it up. But yeah, it's definitely in marketing.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, So I know I went on a tiny little rant there compared to your usual rant, sir, but are
No,
we
I like.
I don't do it very often. I try to keep mine in check so that you can have ample space for yours. So, are we getting close though to wrapping this one up?
I don't know. You tell me. You think we got everything covered? I know we were starting out. This was going to be like a winter adaptation episode, but this turned more into a winter feeding wildlife rant. Big rant on my part. Sorry about that.
No, that's like I just said, I try to leave ample room for your rants. I gave up years ago on stopping them, so I'm cool with it.
So, has this conversation today led to any thoughts of what we should talk about on our next episode, or you want to give that some thought?
I mean, so we should probably let our listener chime in. Sorry, that's funny because of our reboot. We're back to basics. Part of me thinks that I'm having this whole what was her name? Rachel, um, the
uh,
spring book.
oh, Rachel
Um,
Carson,
Thank
Silent
you.
Spring.
Thank you. Yeah, Silent Spring. I mean, I'm really starting to feel like this would be a good segue into us doing a start on topic, completely go off topic on the just the food web, and just the cascading events that you see in nature and the I mean, not that I want to beat humans up too bad because we do happen to be part of that species, but on the flip side, how we have a tendency to think we are doing something that's good, and then we find out later, looking in the rear view mirror, about all the consequences we couldn't predict because
we
it's too
we don't
complex.
we don't have enough time or number of episodes to do all the whoops, that wasn't a really good idea. It sounded good when I started it, but
Yeah. Nah, you're
anyway.
not wrong, but I think that probably like a trophic cascades or, just something like that. I think that would be good.
Okay. We'll start off talking about trophic cascades and we'll probably end up talking about bear hibernation.
Great.
So anyway, we ready to call this one a wrap? Is that what you do? You
Um,
call it a wrap or you wrap it up? I don't know.
Well, I mean, or we could like start rapping about it, but I think we both have proven our musical prowess sucks. So, but before that, don't you think we should probably tell people how to contact us if they have any topics or questions or if they want to drive our banter next week?
Yeah, that one listener we have. So
The
Marsha,
one.
if you want to get a hold of us, I'll let Stephanie tell you how to do it.
So, yeah, okay, folks. So, if anybody does want to reach out to myself, Stephanie, or my extraordinarily brilliant co-host Daryl here, if you have questions or a topic that you would like for us to discuss, we really do want that kind of feedback. So please feel free to message us on either. You can get a hold of us through Facebook Messenger at the Wildlife for You Facebook page, or by writing an email to us. You can just write in at wfyquestions@gmail.com. So that's WFY like Whiskey Foxtrot Yankee or Wildlife for You. But Wildlife for You questions, WFY questions@gmail.com.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from you. We know we're starting from scratch again. Would you believe 4 years ago, Steph, before you ditched us, we had there's like 11,000 followers for the Facebook page. We were doing pretty good on the podcast. We gotta rebuild
We were in
up.
the hundreds.
We gotta rebuild our following. So anyway, yes, we'd love to hear from anyone out there other than an echo chamber right now. But we do thank Marsha for listening. And remember, Marsha, remember, folks, when it comes to wildlife, your knowledge often means their existence. So thank you and be well, and we will see you next time.